So many people look at this picture of a gun and they might feel indifferent to it. That's what the majority would report. At most, people might feel uncomfortable from a picture of a gun, but once again, most people feel pretty indifferent. The reason why it's important to note these reportings is because two psychologists named Berkowitz and LePage created a study that actually went against the majority thought that a picture of a weapon or maybe the presence of a weapon has no effect on your psychological um, thinking. And what they found was conducted by studies that the presence of weapons actually does create a sort of unconscious influence in your mind to think more aggressively. They conducted a study in 1967 that had shown this. The study consisted of two groups. Both of them had sat in a waiting room waiting for the study to begin as they volunteered to participate. And something that was really important to it was they had a confederate, which is an undercover psychologist researcher, sit in the room with them and imposed as a fellow participant. Now, what this fellow participant did was they had actually provoked the actual participant to feel a little angered. What they did was they had made a comment that was kind of under their breath and rude about the participant. Now, this is important because later in the study, the real participant had a chance to administer these electric shocks towards this undercover psychologist confederate. Now, these electric shocks weren't actually hurtful or violent, they were more so just annoying. But it's really important to note this because those electric shocks were really significant in showing aggression. And the one key difference between these two groups of participants was one group was giving administered shocks to the Confederate, but there was the presence of guns. And then the other group was not in the presence of guns. And what they found was significant data and reportings that showed that when in the presence of a gun, these participants were more likely to be influenced in acting um, aggressively. And this is what the psychologists called priming and weapons effect. Priming is something that is stated as a psychological phenomenon that influences the way a person might think. The weapons effect is created by Berkowitz and LePage, and they influence thinking into acting in more aggressive ways by having that presence of a weapon, whether it's a gun or a knife, and so on. This is really important to note because since 1967, they've done numerous studies that either extended further the research and also implemented and corrected the limitations that the first study had. And it's important to note that all of these numerous studies that have been conducted up to this day had all shown significant findings that the weapons effect is true and it is a psychological phenomenon that affects people unconsciously. And this is really important to note because this affects all of us, especially in today's political debate whether we should arm teachers with guns. And people often forget that guns, that in order to protect people physically, it is not to be forgotten that your physical and mental health are interconnected and they're interdependent upon each other. So, giving people guns in school, giving teachers guns, is not an efficient way to protect the school. In fact, if we're considering both their psychological and physical aspects of a person, this might actually provoke a person to become more violent rather than to prevent violence. And on top of that, It is also noted that in the military, we spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars for training to help these people in the military so they do not have this psychological phenomenon to help them or to affect them. And we already underpay teachers enough as it is to be able to provide the funds for teachers, and not only teachers, but anyone else who's aware of a gun that's present, including janitors, including the students, including other teachers and principals. It's insufficient and it's impossible to expect that we would provide that type of money. So it's really important to know the psychological effect that this has as it affects all of us, because we are all college students and we either know someone that's in school or that at least works at a school. Me personally, not only am I in school, but my mom is a teacher and she works specifically with kids that have behavioral disorders. And for her to go to school with a gun and to be around kids that have behavioral disorders, a lot of them pertaining to aggressive behaviors, is not helpful to them at all. And we need to think about this before we decide that this is what we want to do and put in our schools with kids and other people. Thank you.